Good morning. How are you this morning? Hey, my name is Jeremy. I am one of the pastors here at the church, and it is my pleasure to get to be with you this morning. I'm not talking about temperature, but it's hot in here this morning. I told you several weeks ago, some of you will remember this, whether you're online or in here, I'd mentioned that when I was at Garywood, which is in Hueytown, when I was 11 years old, and I was filled with the Spirit with an evangelist. His name was R.W. Schambach. I realized I was talking to my in-laws, Ron and Suzanne, right after that, and they were like, "We didn't know you were old enough to know who R.W. Schambach is." And I was like, I'm not. I made that up. I'm not old enough to know that, but I do. But I was filled with the Spirit. And what happened was after that, the night after all of that had happened and the altar service had happened and everybody's just kind of lingering around. You know how when there's an altar service, a lot of times you just linger. You're like, I don't want to leave this space. And so everybody's lingering. And I remember hearing our pastor, Pastor Loper, come up and say, at 6 o'clock, so the service was at 7, at 6 o'clock every night throughout this camp meeting, throughout this 2-week revival, at 6 p.m., the prayer team will be meeting in the back next to the choir room. And I'd never heard that before. I'm sure he had said that a prayer team met. And I heard it. It was like my ears were opened up, and all of a sudden there was this homing missile. I was like, okay, I got to be in there tomorrow night. So we came the next night, and I remember walking into the door, and I was late because we weren't going to be there at 6. We were going to be there at 7, so I came in like 30 minutes late, and I remember opening the door and just going, oh, so that's where all of this happens. That's where the heat from all of this stuff that happens in here, that's where all of that happens. And so this morning, I went into our prayer room. We have our prayer team meets, over 20 people just right there. And I remember walking in this morning and just have that flashback because when I got in there, it was hot. And I'm not talking about temperature hot. I'm talking about it just felt like things were being stirred up. You know how 100 years ago there was a boiler room for a business or a building or a house or whatever. There was a boiler room, and all of the heat was coming from the boiler room, and that was what was happening over there. So it's hot in here today, and I wanted to recognize that. I wanted to recognize that in two ways. Number one is to tell you, what you're feeling, man, it's hot in here. But secondly, to say I've also been in seasons of my life where everybody seemed to be responding to the heat, and I was as cold and as dry as ever. And I want you to know, if you're cold this morning, that's okay. There's a place for you here, and God's presence is here, and it's in these moments that we trust. And so we trust that God is here, and I've been in those moments. I've been in those seasons, and all we have is trust. That's what faith is. So, a couple quick announcements. One is hello online. So glad to be with you this morning. There are as many people watching online as there are in this room right now, and so sometimes we forget that. So online, so glad to have you. Just after the service, soon as we dismiss this morning, there's a water baptism service right out here. So love for every one of you to stay. I get excited about water baptism, and you'll hear me say this again out there. The greatest moment in the life of a Christian is the day they give their life to Jesus. But the greatest moment in the life of a church is water baptism. It's where men and women and young people, and we have all of the above, say to a church body, hey, I've made a decision to follow Christ, and I need your help, and that's what we do together. So it's a beautiful moment. It'll happen out there, and it'll be loud and fun, and I would love if every one of you would stay for that. And then lastly, Pastor Jay is on a family trip out west. The West are out west, and they are in this trip. They're doing a big trip. This is the first time one of the boys have left home for a while, so they'll be dropping Tyler off at college, and so they're out west. So me and some of the other staff, we're doing a vision series about what Kingwood Church is about. And so Pastor Jay wanted to share a thought with you, so we're gonna listen to him share a thought, and then I will begin this vision series.
Good morning, Kingwood Church. I'm Jay West, the lead pastor here at Kingwood. Our vision is to be a movement of hope. Now, we live in an overwhelming and often hopeless That's how I felt before I met God. But once I met Him, He was no longer a theory or a story in a book. He was a real person who was present and longed to meet me. That truth changed my life, and it's still changing my life today. God is present, and He wants to meet you, not just the day you become a Christian, but every day. Not just at church, but in every part of your life. God is always present, and our vision is to help you meet Him. We're so excited to share with you the heart and vision of Kingwood Church this month in our Movement of Hope series. Today we're talking about helping people meet God.
So back in January of 2018, a number of us got together and said, God, what are you doing in our church? Who do you want Kingwood Church to be? And over the next 2 years, God spoke to us that He wanted Kingwood Church to be a movement of hope to Shelby County, and then a movement of hope beyond. And we identified ways that we believe God has called us to be a movement of hope, and those are helping people meet God, helping people find their purpose, living this crazy belief that anybody can find Jesus, and then equipping every one of us to take another step toward Jesus. And so that applies to all of you. This morning I want to talk about meeting God. Before I do, I want to tell you, I'm in a t-shirt. You saw Pastor Jay in a t-shirt. If you were online, you saw Pastor Jason in this t-shirt. It says a movement of hope here. And if you want one there, we have them in the foyer after service. You can buy one after service, and you can be matchy-matchy with us throughout the month. If y'all like to be matchy. Do y'all like matchy-matchy? I remember one time, I'm already off my notes. That didn't take long at all. But I remember one time I was dating this girl in high school, and I hated matchy-matchy. And her mom bought us matching shirts for Christmas. And I went, this is the worst possible Christmas gift I could have ever gotten. And she asked me to go to the mall. She said, hey, let's go to the mall this weekend. I was like, sure. And she said, will you please wear your shirt? And I went, oh my God, please don't make me wear the shirt. And she said these words, 11th grade. If you love me, you'll wear it. So I walked through the mall in a shirt I hated with a girl that I was trying to prove to I loved. We didn't stay together, by the way, so I might as well not have worn the shirt. But I do want you to be matchy-matchy with me for the month. Boy, I set that up like you really want to go buy a shirt, huh? Every one of them are different. They're all different logos, different colors. No, this is it. This is what we're all wearing this month and into our community. So meeting God. This summer, my family and I've got a friend who was in the Air Force and was stationed in a bunch of different places in the Air Force. He was in Germany, in England, up in North Dakota, which I think is another country. He was in Italy, and when he retired from the Air Force, he asked his family, where was our favorite place to live? And they said, Italy. So he said, all right, well, let's move back to Italy. So they moved back to Italy, and he has become a missionary to military kids with Young Life. And so he asked me and the family to come over this summer. He called me on the phone last year. He said, what would it take to get you to come do our youth camp? And I went, just say it. Just say the words, and we're on our way. So this summer we got to go to Italy, and the youth camp was 5 days. So we got there early and did a bunch of sightseeing. And in the sightseeing, we visited Venice and Verona and Vicenza and Rome. How many of you have been to Italy before? Any of y'all been to Italy? Yeah. So I'll tell you what surprised me the most. I didn't realize that I would love this as much as I did. But he asked me before we got there, he said, you guys, would y'all be interested in going to the Vatican? And I said, yeah, I think so. I think I would enjoy that. Hannah, my wife Hannah, is an art teacher. And I'm a minister, and so it was like the perfect place for a minister and an art teacher to go, because you might not know this. Maybe you do. I did not. The Vatican is filled with priceless art. In fact, it might be, I asked Hannah, I said, is this the place on the planet that has the most priceless art in one centralized place? She said, it's either this or the Louvre. Like it is priceless. There's no way to even understand how much the art is worth. So here's what we got to do. We did two things. The first one is we got to go to St. Peter's Basilica, which is a giant cathedral that is on the place where St. Peter is buried, and it's unbelievably beautiful. It's unbelievably gorgeous. It's just immaculate. And I remember walking in and just getting all the feels. Have you ever been into a place that you went, this place is sacred. This is a holy place. And I remember walking in and going, this is holy. And then we walked down into this tomb area, and there in this box were the remains of St. Peter. And I remember just going, that's where Jesus' best friend is buried, like that right there. And it just was overwhelming. Then we walked through the catacombs and saw where men and where their popes for the last 500 years are buried, like right there. And it just was such a sacred place. We walked out of the temple, and there was this giant tower that was the place where Peter was crucified upside down. And it just felt all of the feels. Like I just remember thinking, this is one of the holiest places I've ever been. Now, don't get me wrong. I even mentioned this a few weeks ago. There are no more holy places on earth or in the universe than another. But it sure did feel really holy. So then we went through the museums of the Vatican. And I didn't know this. I knew that the Sistine Chapel was in Rome, but I didn't know that it was in the Vatican. And so we're walking these hallways. And what's crazy is before you get to the Sistine Chapel, you walk, I think it's about a half a mile of hallways where you're just looking at art on walls, on ceiling, everywhere. And you get to see art from all of the Ninja Turtles. You get to see them from Donatello and Raphael and Michelangelo and Leonardo. You get to see all of the Ninja Turtles have artwork there, Caravaggio. But it was beautiful. But then we walked into the Sistine Chapel, and everything's quiet. And you look up. You might not know this. I just have learned this more recently, but a lot of real famous art is actually on walls or on the ceiling. And so this picture that you're looking at now, called The Creation of Adam, is on the ceiling. And so you look up, and you're in a room with a couple hundred people, and you're all jammed into there together, and no one's talking. Because everybody realizes this is a pretty sacred space. And you're looking up, and it struck me just in that moment, I just was like, this is a place, I feel God here. Not because only God is there, but because I was so moved by my thoughts and awareness of God. And I see this beautiful painting that supposedly took about 4 years. And I remember seeing this. This isn't a thought that is mine, but I remember reading about this. But I want you to see one important thing. And it's this. Look at God, and look how He is fully stretched as far as He possibly can toward man. See that? He's fully stretched. And then look at how nonchalant Adam is. And his hands like this. And it's as if the painter wants you to see all Adam has to do is make a move. All he's got to do is extend a finger. All he's got to do is God's done everything. He's come close as he can come. And he's reached as far as he can reach. And all Adam has to do is put his finger up. This morning, I want to talk about meeting God. And I want to talk about who we are called to be as Kingwood Church. And there are these moments where you walk into a room and it's hot. Or you walk into the youth room or the children's room or into soak or into a prayer room or into a small group room. And it's hot. And the presence is tangible and palpable and feelable. And all all I've got to do is just stretch out a finger and connect myself to what's happening. There's some of you in this room, you walked in pretty beat up and you went, oh, it's hot in here. And you stretched out your finger and immediately were connected. And so I want to talk about what it means to meet God. And what Kingwood Church has been called to be and to do, and how to connect in that way. There's this idea in Celtic spirituality that speaks of these thin places, where the natural and the supernatural worlds come together at their narrowest. I don't know if that's the reality, but it's almost this idea that there are these moments in our lives where we connect with God, and there's this thin place as if the supernatural is reaching right into the natural space. And this morning I've called them hot places. But the thin places, the places that we tangibly feel and sense and connect deeply with God. I want to give you a couple thoughts this morning, just two main thoughts this morning, and I want to share a few stories, but the first one is this. I want us to expect the expected. You might think expect the unexpected, but I want us to be challenged to expect the expected. And what I mean by that is, as a church, I want us to create these environments, to create these spaces, and to create these moments where when somebody is with us, they're in the presence of God. But we're always in the presence of God. So it's got to be, it's where we are aware and we feel and we sense and we respond to the presence of God. I want to create these spaces where we know that God is doing so. We believe here at the church that God's presence changes lives. So anywhere that God is, He's in this speaking life business, and He's in this changing life business. And in Kingwood, we have this beautiful history of creating these spaces where you and I, there's some of you that have been in this church for 40 plus years, and you can right now catalog in your mind and go back and think of moments that you met the living God on a carpet or at an altar or in a room or in a prayer meeting or in a space. It just, God was there, and it was hot, and the space was thin, and there was God. John Wesley called these moments means of grace. Means of grace are these ideas that God has given us these gifts that are ways of connecting with Him. So it might be a song. God has given us a song to sing to Him to connect to His presence. Like we just did that, right? And many of you in this room, because I know it wasn't just me, many of you in this room were like, whoo, I feel that. I feel something different in here. It's a means of grace. Means of grace are things like prayer. God has given us a gift to be able to talk to Him and commune with Him and speak to Him and Him speak to us. We call that prayer. It's a means of grace. He gave us the gift of connection. And I want us to be a place that creates these environments where means of grace are happening often. I've got a friend in here, a new friend, named TJ, who I met TJ this Easter on Thursday night. We set up Stations of the Cross around the building. And for those of you that don't know what Stations of the Cross are, basically it is a journey through the final day of Jesus' life leading to the crucifixion. And it is almost always done through art. So we set up 12 pieces of art all around the hallway of the church, and then recorded kind of a guided prayer time. And you just put on these headphones and walked around. And I see a handful of you, many of you did that. You just walked around. It took about an hour. You just spent walking around and just meditating and thinking about God, a means of grace. Meditating and thinking about the last night of Jesus' life before He would resurrect. And TJ and Amanda walked in with their 3 little children, and I went, whew, this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard. This is going to be evil. But I immediately sensed these guys are hungry. They're just hungry to do whatever they can do to connect with God. And so they came out. I said, how was it? They're like, well, it's pretty good. Imagine spending an hour walking around staring at a piece of art with 3 children, all like 10 and under, with headphones on. So that was good. We tried really hard. We wanted to. And so I was talking to TJ, and he said, man, can I tell you something that I really love at the church? And I said, what? He said, I love the music. I love the worship. I've always connected with God really deeply in worship, and I love it. He said, the problem is sometimes I just don't know the songs. And I said, oh, TJ, I can help you with that. We actually make a YouTube playlist every single series and put every song that we're going to sing for the series is on the YouTube playlist. You can listen to it all week long and know exactly what we're going to be singing and be ready to sing. I said, in fact, we're doing some special stuff for Easter. I'm going to send you those songs tonight. And I shot him a text message that night and said, this is what we're going to be singing for Easter. And I've listed 4 songs. And I remember leading worship standing right here. I remember leading. And I doing this. Y'all know I was doing this. Apparently, I do that a lot because there was a little girl, she was like 8 years old, told me this week. She's like, well, I love when you do this right here. I'm like, really? You caught that? Even you noticed that? So, but I was right here. And I remember looking out, first song, and I looked right over there at TJ, and hands were up, and he was just singing. And then we went to the second song, and hands were still up, and every word. I looked at the third song, hands were, and I just was moved. I was just moved to know that we had created this space for him to connect with God. And I can't keep my hands up that long, I'm not that strong. And they never came down. Just like, I'm going to worship God. I'm going to connect with God. I'm going to reach through this thin space, and I'm going to grab the heat, and I'm going to connect with God. I want us to be a place that constantly is creating these moments, not just in this room, but man, our kids are in there right now, in the heat. I loved, man, I have 4 children. Addison didn't get to do this, but Carson and Braden did, and then Emerson will. But I remember watching them in the bayou. Right there, you can walk out. I'd prefer you didn't do it right now, please, but you could walk out, and there's a window right there, and the bayou's happening this morning, where 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds are hearing about Jesus. They're singing songs about Jesus, and they're feeling the heat. They don't have a language for it, but trust me when I tell you this, they have a better idea than some of us do. Feeling the heat in there. We do these trips. We took 100 young people and leaders. We do a camp called Beach Freak at the beach every year down in Panama City. 500 people. We hosted a camp for 500 people this year, leaders and teenagers, where they went down and they had a moment to just be away from all of this, not necessarily this, but sure, this too, but away from the normal routine and to get into God's presence, disconnected from that and connected to Him. And one of the things I look forward to the most every single year is Wednesday night. We end up doing a service that we just call it Beach Night. And what that means is instead of altar call here at the front, we go out to the beach. And it's kind of funny this year. I always tell our speaker, I was like, here's what we're looking for. We're looking for some type of moment that we can create this space where our leaders can pray with our young people on the beach. And so this year, our speaker, he spoke on David and Bathsheba and how David had blood on his hands. And then his sermon was, we all have blood on our hands. And this really cool idea in theory, funny how that happens, really cool idea in theory was, as everybody leaves the sanctuary, the chapel, they're going to dip their hands in red paint and then walk to the beach and pray with their leader for, like, God, I have blood on my hands, forgive me, and then receive the grace of God and dip their red hands into the ocean and let it wash away. It's a beautiful idea, right? I thought it was brilliant. So on their way out, you just have to know the way this works is you're in a chapel, then you walk down a street to the beach. So they dip their hands in red paint. And beach night also happens to be kind of photography night where everybody takes nice pictures so they're in nice clothes. So you've got these kids, 500, dip their hands in red paint, but they don't want to get any of the paint that's dripping onto their nice clean clothes. So they're walking down the street like this. Red paint dripping. And I had told them on the way out, don't say anything. Like this is a somber moment. This is a sacred moment. Don't do anything. So you got 500 kids walking down the street with red paint on their hands like this. And some people came over and said, hey, are you guys a cult? And I said, yes, we are. I can see how you got there, and it is easier for me to just say yes than for me to try to explain what we were trying to do. Yes, we're a cult. But creating these moments and these spaces where we connect with God, can I just tell you, whether you're online or you're in this room right now, we're going to do everything that we can in this church to create environments and spaces for you to connect with God and receive these means of grace every moment that we can. It's what God's called us to do because it brings hope. You know how it brings hope? Because God's presence changes lives. God's presence changes lives. The second thing and the second point this morning is, so the first one was expect the expected. Like we expect God to do something, so let's actually expect God to do something. The second one is name the unexpected. There are these moments where the thin veil is separated and we meet God face to face. In fact, I would say you're lucky if this happens like a dozen times in your lifetime. You're lucky if you have these deeply moving, life-changing moments of your life where you give your heart to Jesus, where you're filled with the Spirit, where God heals you, where He does a miracle, where you see your prodigal son or daughter come home, these tangible moments. You're lucky if you get like a dozen of those in your life. These moments when God comes close, like the Sistine Chapel. But for most of us, we don't live a life where we're enraptured by the transcendent like the Sistine Chapel all of the time. Instead, we normally live a life like another piece of art you might have seen before called Where's Waldo? Like God's hiding somewhere and we're spending every waking minute, God, are you there? Are you listening? Do you care? Or do you even care what's going on in my life? Are you doing anything? That's the regular part of our life. That's the place that most of us live. I'm going to show you where Waldo is because some of you can't get it out of your mind. But he's just right here above this little umbrella. Like some of y'all are like, I can't. I'm just OCD and I can't find it. So there's Waldo. He's above that little red and white umbrella right there, directly above. Everybody see him? Just say you see him. Just say you see him. Just lie to yourself. All right, good. So there's Waldo. Brother Lawrence wrote, God has various ways of drawing us to Him, but sometimes He hides Himself. This idea that God is close, but so is everything else. Seeing the hidden God in the mundane, the normal, and the everyday parts of our life, the regular parts of our life. I don't mean mundane in that it isn't important at all. I mean that it's typically unremarkable unless we reflect upon it, or that we've experienced it or heard about experienced of it so often that it goes unnoticed. Eugene Peterson says this: pastoral ministry. Put your thinking cap on because I want you to hear this, because this is what I'm called to do. This is what God has called me to do. And what God has called your pastors of this church to do, and what God is calling you to do. Peterson says pastoral ministry is the task of helping a person take seriously what is treated dismissively by the publicity-infatuated and the crisis-sated mind, and then to receive this mixed, random material of life as the raw material for high holiness. The everyday stuff, the random stuff, the simple stuff, the common things. My job and our job at Kingwood Church is not primarily to have these enrapturing, swept up in His presence, laid out on the floor, miraculous experiences with the divine. And let's face it, how often does that really happen? But that's not the primary job. If you want to know what the primary job of meeting with God, if we are as pastors and if we are as a church to offer hope to our community, our primary job is not to create moments where that happens. Our primary job is to point out that it already is. That's my job. My job is to help you name it. Your job is to help someone name it. You're walking through the grocery store and all of a sudden you sense this nudge. Dorothy Day called it this notion. You just sense this notion that something is, there's something thin here in this moment. And you just say, hey, couldn't help but notice that you were shopping for green beans and I was too. Would this be weird if I prayed for you? Just these moments where you just see that God's in that moment. To see the tangible, the present, the mundane, the ordinary, the routine, the everyday as the raw material of God's active, present work in the world. 1 Samuel 3 says this. So Samuel has been given to the temple and to Eli, the prophet, by Hannah, his mother. And he's just a young boy and he lives in the temple. And he serves Eli. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli in those days. The word of the Lord was very rare. There were not many visions, and one night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. Normal moment, normal day, normal routine. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. And the Lord called Samuel. Listen to that. The Lord spoke to Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am," and he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, what did you say?" Notice what's happening. Samuel hears the voice of the Lord and confuses it for Eli's voice and runs to Eli and says, "Hey, what do you need?" And Eli says, I didn't call you. Go back and lie down. So he went and laid down. Again, the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and ran back in there to Eli and said, "Yes, sir, Eli, I'm here. You called me." "My son," Eli said, I didn't call you. You're hearing things. Go lay back down. Listen to these words. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Please hear this. Samuel had never heard the voice of the Lord, yet God was in his life working and doing and drawing and calling. There's not a person on this planet that the Holy Spirit isn't wooing toward Jesus. Not a person on the planet. There is no person that you can walk by in a store or work with in your office. There's not a person that you can be around on the planet that God is not already drawing them to you. Your job is not to do the work. Your job is to recognize the work of the Holy Spirit. What is the Holy Spirit already doing? What's the Holy Spirit up to right now? And how can I get in on that? How can I point to that? How can I name that? How can I say, that's God? That's God right there. And Eli finally, after the third time, gets it. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. Kingwood Church is called to be Eli, to recognize the voice of the Lord in someone's life that hasn't yet heard the voice of the Lord. We're called to be namers. When someone has a question, when someone has a fault, when someone has an inkling to move toward God, it's for us to say, yes, 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 that's God. That's God working in your life. It doesn't matter if they're Christians or not. The church doesn't have a monopoly on the voice of God. Please hear this. The church doesn't have a monopoly on the movement of God. God is bigger than the church. He speaks to whom He wants to. He moves in whose lives He wants to. It's the church's job not to make God move. It's the church's job to say, yes, that's God. That's God. That's our job. We don't make God do anything. You and I, we don't make God do anything. We just say, yes, that's God. Yes, yes. I've sensed that before. I've felt that before. I've known that before. I've realized that before. I've been awakened to that before. Yeah, that's God. I don't want to constantly try to create and whip up these moments of supernatural transcendence where I wrongly reinforce this idea that we only meet with God when something unearthly or supernatural happens. When someone can't control their crying or their laughing, or when someone is miraculously healed, or when all of us feel the goosebumps, or when we go off of schedule. To think that that is the only way to experience God, to truly have had a move of the Spirit, is to reduce God to a circus act. He swings into town once in a while and He puts on a show, and that's not who God is. He's at work in every life on the planet, moving and drawing and wooing, and it's your job to say, that's God. That's what God does. God, I have like 3 more pages of notes. I'm not going to. Speak to me. Tell me what to cut. I want to say 2 things. I got to skip 37. I'm a pastor. And all that means is that God has called me to love you and to pray for you and to pray for you well. That's my job. It's on my schedule. I pray for you every day. I call many of you out by name. There's some of you in this room right now, I've been praying for you every day. Because you said, will you pray for me? I said, yeah. And when I say yes, it goes to my notes and I pray for you every day. Somebody in here right now asked me to pray for a job change. I've been praying for it for months. Somebody in here battling a medical issue right now, I've been praying for you every single day for months. There's somebody in here right now with a marriage issue. I've been praying for you now for over a week, every single day. I'm not a professional Christian. That's just what my job is. It's to pray. It's to pray for you. I read about God a lot. I talk about God a lot. I talk to people about God a lot. I try to intentionally spend time with God a lot. But here's what I want to tell you. Most of the time, I don't feel God. Like there's no goosebumps. By the way, when our prayer team moved into that room over there, I said, I'm going to start praying in there because it's hot. So I go into that room over there most every morning. And I pray for you. I pray for my family. I go in there. But I want you to know, I don't feel stuff all the time. Maybe once every 2 months, I'm just overwhelmed with God's goodness or grace. And for me, that means I just start crying. But that's like once every 2 months, maybe. Most of the time, there's nothing eventful that happens. Like I don't whip anything up and like there's no, like if you go in there right now, you're not going to like, there's gold dust isn't going to fall out of the sky or anything. Like nothing. Like when I come out of there, remember how Moses came off the mountain and they're like, cover his face, he's been with God. No one has ever said that to me when I came out of that room. Never once have they said, cover his face. Nobody said that. In fact, every once in a while I'll be like, what have you been doing? Just praying. I can't remember the last time that something memorable in the way that I described it, like something just whipped up happened. But do I meet with God every day? Absolutely. Every single day. My job is less, I believe, about creating these big moments and events for you than it is more about helping you to see God in your life every single day. I had a little girl in my youth group about 15 years ago named Ellie. And Ellie was, she's one of those kids that showed up and her family didn't go to our church. And a lot of times what that means is, in fact, it always means she made the choice to be there. She didn't get forced to go. She showed up because she wanted to be there. And sometimes it was hard for her to connect her church life and her Jesus life with her school life and her young life. And she would do this all the time. She'd just go live hard and then come in and pray for forgiveness and grace and all of those things. And Ellie graduated from high school and I didn't see her for like 10 years. And one day on Facebook, she sent me a message. And all it said was, hey, Pastor Jeremy, I have a question. And I was like, hey, Ellie, what's up? What's up? Shoot. I think I actually said shoot. Shoot. She said, 10 years. She said, is God reserving his judgment to be poured out for the last day and the final judgment, or is he doing it right now? And I went, can we talk on the phone? And she said, yes. So like a day or two later, I said, hey, I'm free. You got a minute? Yeah, she calls me. And she says, hey, is God pouring out his judgment, waiting to pour out his judgment to the final day? Or is he doing it right now? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know that answer. Does anybody know that answer? And she goes, oh, I just thought you would know. And I said, no. In fact, I say I don't know the more questions now than I ever have. But can I ask you a question? I haven't talked to you in 10 years. What made you think to ask this question? She said, I don't know. It's just on my mind. And you're the first person I thought of. And I said, Ellie, what if I told you that you weren't really asking that question? Like you don't really care what the answer is. But you got a deeper question. And I heard her start crying. I said, what is the question, Ellie? She said, I just miss God. Can I come back to church? I said, are you kidding? Of course you can come back to church, Ellie. This silly question that nobody's ever going to know was God. God put that in your heart. He put this sense of you just missed him in your heart. and you didn't know how to exactly say it, so you asked this question, and I want you to know, we don't know that answer, but I do know what question you had. And that's, does God still love me? Does he still care? Is he still interested? And can I tell you, Ellie, that's God. God put that in your heart. That's what we're called to be at Kingwood Church. We're called to name these moments that are God. And they show up in so many crazy ways. Had a dad tell me this morning, his son, he has to almost force him to come to youth. And all of a sudden, his son started going on his own and bringing friends. He said, I don't even know what's going on. And I said, hey, that's God. And he goes, oh yeah, that's God. That's my job. That's your job, is to name God, to point out that's God, to say that's God, to say that right there, that inkling, that notion, that nudge, that's God. There's some of you in this room right now that you weren't coming this morning. And somehow you're here and you're like, if I told you the story of how I got here, it's just dumb. But here I am, I'm sitting here. There's some of you on this morning watching online. You just stumbled across. In fact, today's Sunday, you might even be watching like next Friday. And you just stumbled upon this. And all I want to do is just say, hey, that might be God. It might just be God. God might have brought you into this moment so that you could hear he's close. So that you could hear that he cares about you, so you could hear that he loves you deeply, so that you could hear that he's pleased with you. Like Jesus heard, this is my son, this is my daughter, this is my son, chosen and marked by my love, the pride of my life. You need to hear that this morning. I want you to know that's God. God's speaking to you this morning. There's something bubbling, there's something kind of moving. That's God too. Some of you feel nothing. That's God too. I spent years of my life. Trust me when I tell you, you might not know my story, so just trust me when I tell you, years of my life never feeling a thing, and I just said, God, are you there? And God often would say, yes. I'm in the nothing. I'm in the coldness. I'm in the stillness. I'm in the nothing. I'm there. That's me too. I'm in the feel-good goosebumps, the rambunctious and rapturing moments, but I'm in the nothing. I'm in the heaven and the hell. I'm in the heights and the depths. I'm in the mountains and the valley. That's me. And this morning, you're in the heights. That's God. I don't have to just tell you. You got it today. But we don't live there forever. But there are a number of you in this room right now that are so cold. And can I tell you that God is also cold? He's not just heat. He's cool. This morning we're going to sing about Jesus for a minute, and I'm going to come back out and give you an opportunity to respond. But God is here, and it's hot in this room right now. It's also cold, and that's God.